Michael Kaskey-Blomain is back for today's Inside the Sixers. He is CBS Sports NBA writer, and he, like all guys, appear via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. And if you're watching the show live on video, there he is, MKB. What's going on?
What's up, Mike? How's it going?
All is good, man. And we saw the Sixers win last night, which we kind of thought Embiid and Simmons, that's a bad Oklahoma City team. They are essentially the process Sixers there. But you wrote a piece over at CBS Sports talking about the Sixers and their schedule coming up because they had lost 4 in a row against some good teams, and that's concerning, but they didn't have a lot of pieces. But they could try to make some of these games up here with the full roster, and they have what? The easiest schedule left? Is it in the East or in basketball?
No, it's in the entire NBA, Mike. The last 2 weeks of the season, the Sixers have, the easiest route out of all the teams left, and ultimately the Nets have one of the top 10 toughest schedules. The Bucks aren't in the top 10, but it's still tougher than the Sixers. So, obviously they got to get healthy and they got to win some games, but the schedule is on their side moving forward for the rest of the regular season.
So they have the easiest schedule left in the NBA. It was a good chance for them to jump over here. Let me ask you, watching last night, I think you and I are on the same page with Ben Simmons. We both appreciate him greatly and what he adds to this team. But seeing what they didn't have when he was out and then what they had last night with him back, and the big question is, MKB, does this translate to playoff success? Because so many people say, look, I only will believe it when I see him in the playoffs. Offensively is where the big problem is, but how much not having him defensively changes things, and then getting him back last night, what that did for them?
Yeah, it's huge, Mike. And I think you could see in those 4 games that, they were missing him. They obviously lost all 4. And that wasn't a coincidence. I think, obviously, it's easy to say, if they had him in the Suns game, they could have potentially put him on, Chris Paul or some of these players toward the end of the game. If they had him in certain games, they could have him on matchups. But so much of what he does on the defensive end translates to easy opportunities for the Sixers on the offensive end. And to me, I think that's what they were missing the most. You would see they were forced to work out of the half court a lot more. They weren't getting the same amount of threes on the fast break because, Ben, obviously, we've said this a million times. He's one of the most dangerous players in the entire league with the ball in his hands in the open court. And he's the type of player that makes him so special. He can get a defensive rebound, not have to outlet it to anyone, take it himself, push the pace. And then he has that vision to find the guys. And at this point in the season, guys like Danny Green, Korkmaz, Seth Curry, they know exactly where to go on the fast breaks to maximize where Ben's going to find them. Danny goes to the corner, obviously, Furkan and Seth on the wings. And Ben is, one of the best at finding those guys. So to me, obviously, they miss him in terms of his individual defense, but also I think they missed him a ton in what his defense generates then to offensive looks for them.
Yeah, and I know that one of the things that I've been wanting to see, MKB, the rest of the way here, we haven't been able to see yet, is how George Hill will fit in. Yeah. The problem is he's been playing without Ben Simmons, and he's been playing not the role that they got him for. So did we get a little glimpse of what his role might be and how that will help this team out?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe that might have been a little bit of the silver lining when Ben was out because it gave, obviously more on-court opportunity to George Hill and to let him play with the starters for a little bit more because I do think, his role is absolutely going to be off the bench running that second unit. But given his experience, his IQ, and his decision-making, I think he's going to end up playing a good chunk of minutes with the starters or at least with, parts of the starting 5 throughout the postseason. And I think, it was expected it was going to take him a couple of games to get his feet back under him to get accustomed to the Sixers and their style and everything. But I think over the past few games, you're starting to see exactly what he brings to the floor, which is another good perimeter defender. He's a guy that can, guard a point guard or a shooting guard on the other team and do a good job. But then also on offense, he just, he plays the game at his own pace. He doesn't get sped up. He has a high basketball IQ. He makes good decisions. He can, find his teammates, and he can knock down shots. So I think overall, he's going to be a huge piece for the Sixers moving forward into the postseason. And, I still think we've only seen some of what he's able to do, moving forward. I think as he continues to get comfortable, we'll see, even more of what he's going to bring to this team.
I want to, do you think that he closes game, like maybe Curry starts and Hill closes? Do you see that scenario?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible, depending on matchups. But there's not a huge drop off. I mean, he's not Seth Curry, but in terms of shooting, he's a career close to 40% shooter. He's a guy that you can have on the perimeter in the clutch that can, still provide the space you need around your best players, while also giving you, a little bit of a better defender on that end of the floor. And also a guy that can initiate the offense, make plays for himself and make plays for others when, in the playoffs, especially in the half court, that's going to be something that's extremely important. And frankly, it's something that the Sixers have been, lacking for the past few seasons. So I do think he's going to be a guy that comes in and, potentially closes games or at least plays a major role in the postseason.
Yeah, and I know the one thing, how many minutes? Let me get your thoughts on that. Where is he at playoff-wise minutes? Is he a 28? Less than that? I mean, where do you see him minutes-wise?
Yeah, Mike, I think he's anywhere from mid-20s to 30 minutes a game, depending on the situation. I really think Doc is going to appreciate, his experience, his veteran leadership, and just his savvy out on the court. I think he'll play, large chunks. Obviously, he'll be one of the first guys off the bench with that second unit. But like we were just saying, I think that, in games down the stretch when it's close, that time is going to extend from, he'll be out there with the second unit, and then you'll see some of the starters come trickling back. And I think you'll see him out there with Joel and Ben, and, maybe sometimes he'll take some minutes from Seth. Maybe sometimes he'll take a couple minutes from Danny, depending on, the situation, the game, foul trouble, how guys are shooting, things like that. But, he's a guy that it's not a situation where he's only going to be playing, 8-10 minutes a game. I think he's going to play, a substantial role. And he could be the guy that plays the most minutes for the Sixers off the bench in the postseason.
I know people are probably listening thinking like they acquired, an all-star player here, but he'll not an all-star, but definitely kind of a glue guy, almost like a somewhat of a version of what Danny Green's been giving you, a veteran presence who kind of does multiple things, nothing great, but everything solid.
Exactly. And when you have, 2 or potentially 3 all-stars, obviously Tobias didn't make the team, but when you have those type of players, you don't necessarily need more all-star caliber guys. You need guys exactly like you said, like Danny Green, like Dwight Howard, like George Hill, that have the experience, that have the IQ, and that can come in and know their role. They're not going to come in and look to do more than what's expected of them or more than, what they can handle. And I think that's something, like I just said with George Hill, that's something that maybe this team lacked a little bit in the past. And I think that's the reason, you're seeing their success this year. They have the great mix of, the all-star talent, the top tier guys. They have some young guys, and then they have those veterans with the playoff experience. And George Hill fits right into that latter group.
Yeah. Michael Kaskey-Blomain, CBS Sports, down the stretch they come here. How much do we see, in your opinion, the Sixers stars? We've been seeing all these teams sitting guys out. Do we see Embiid sitting out, or are they going for this 1 seed?
It's going to be a delicate balance, I think, that they have to strike over these last couple of weeks, Mike. They've made it, no secret that they want the 1 seed, and it makes sense this year. That 1 seed could be the difference between having to play both the Bucks and the Nets or just having to play one or the other in the playoffs, and that's huge. So I think that is going to be the goal. But then at the same time, I think you're going to have to try to find a balance. And last night was a great example. You play your starters, you get the win, you take care of business in the first couple quarters, and then you get them rest on the back end. I think, ideally that's what they're going to have to try to aim for because they want to stack up these wins. But at the end of the day, for, most contenders, health is, the priority. And I think that's the same with the Sixers. So I wouldn't be shocked to see both Ben and Joel miss another game or two here before the playoffs for, rest purposes.
Give me your thought. I mean, you cover the Sixers obviously a lot. You're there a lot, but you also cover the rest of the league. Give me your thoughts on the rest of this East all of a sudden, Michael. It's kind of got intriguing. I mean, the Knicks won 9 in a row. That finally got snapped. The Hawks have been playing better. Boston's playing better. Even down to like the 10 team, Washington, I think, had won 8 in a row.
Yeah, and I think that's, for the Sixers, it's a little bit, I don't want to say alarming, but like you said, this back end of the season, we've seen a lot of teams really step up. And I think there's a lot of teams that you can't afford to overlook. If you're one of these higher seeded teams, getting the first or the second seed doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an easy route to you to advance. You have a team like the Wizards who, just won 8 straight games. They have, finally Westbrook's healthy. He's playing like his old self. Bradley Beal dropping 30 a night. The Knicks, who just won 9 straight, they have Julius Randle trying to force his way as a late addition into that MVP conversation. Those are teams that are playing their best ball at the right part of the season. They're getting their guys healthy, and they're, the type of team that you just can't overlook. So, for me, it's a situation where I still think in any of those series, the Sixers would obviously be the favorite and would be able to take care of business. But it's also a situation where they can't afford to overlook any of these teams. And, even if they get the 1 seed, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a cakewalk to the conference finals.
How many guys are in Doc Rivers' playoff rotation?
That's obviously a great question, Mike, and the biggest one. And so far, all the indication I've gotten from Doc to me is that I don't know if he plans on squeezing players out of the rotation as much as just their time and their roles are going to be cut. Just last night, he was saying that it's going to be hard for him not to play Tyrese Maxey in the playoff rotation. Obviously a guy like Dwight's going to be in there as the backup center, George Hill, Shake Milton, Matisse for what he brings on the defensive end, and then on the flip side, Korkmaz for what he brings on the offensive end. So I think, to me, it's still a situation where you might see, 10 or 11 guys get action, but it's, a situation where in the regular season, Doc leaves those guys in for long stretches of time, to the point that you see some people on Twitter complaining that he's leaving the bench unit in for too long. And I think the biggest difference is going to be that's not going to be the case. Like, he's still going to stagger these guys and make sure everyone's fresh and get these guys some minutes, but it's not going to be, where you're seeing a rotation of 5 bench guys in for 5-6 minute stretches. I think it's going to be, a much shorter leash for those guys. And it's going to be, based on matchups in terms of who gets minutes on a given night.
All right, Sixers, Hawks tomorrow night. And of course, you can hear that game here on 97.3 ESPN. Then they'll play the Hawks on Friday night as well. So it's tomorrow against the Hawks, Friday against the Hawks, and then down the stretch in May, it's Spurs, Bulls, Houston, Pelicans, Pistons. So a lot of fluff in there. Pacers, Heat, Magic. So really, by my count, I guess the Spurs and the Heat, after this Hawks, are the only 2 teams left with a winning record. So as Michael wrote over at CBS Sports, very easy schedule the rest of the way. And as you mentioned, they really want to get that number 1 seed. And really, Michael, it's almost like, if they're 2 or 3, you almost feel like they're not going to be able to. If they're 1, yeah, I think they can get to the Eastern Conference Finals and maybe to the Finals. If they're 2 or 3, I'm not sure that they can beat both Brooklyn and the Bucks in consecutive series.
And I think that's kind of how they're looking at it. Not that they can't do that, but just that the road is made infinitely easier when you don't have to go through both of those guys. Because either any of those 3 teams, you could come out of the East, and I wouldn't be shocked at the end of the day if they were the team in the finals. And obviously, you want to be the team that has to minimize how much you have to play those guys. So I think, that's why that top seed's so important. They know it, and they're going to be gunning forward over these last couple of weeks.
MKB, of course, like all guests appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Michael Kaskey-Blomain, CBS Sports, at The Real Mike KB on Twitter. And Sixers Hawks tomorrow night. We'll obviously have that here on 97.3. All right, MKB, good to see you, man.
Thanks, Mike. You too. Talk to you soon.